Carlos Nelson with Cascade Sports, and today we're here with the are you CEO or just president of the Negro League?
Just president.
Just president. All right, I
Just
want you to run the whole thing. We're here today to talk about legendary Negro League player. I want to say known as the Hammer. I'm not even going to say his name. I'll let Bob talk about him. Bob, it's a pleasure always to have you on. Talk about the Hammer.
Well, yesterday was a difficult day for the Negro Leagues family, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and me personally, with the passing of my friend, the late great Henry Aaron. And Carlos, he was my all-time favorite Major League Baseball player. He was my childhood idol as a kid growing up in Crawfordville, Georgia. Crawfordville, Georgia is about 80 miles east of Atlanta, about 50 miles west of Augusta. So I'm a lifelong Braves fan, and every time we stepped on the playground, to play a little sandlot baseball, everybody knew that I was going to be Henry Aaron. Nobody else could be Henry Aaron. I'm Henry Aaron, and so he meant the world to me. And man, it's rare because most of us have sports heroes. But it's rare that you get to meet your sports hero. And then sometimes when you meet your sports hero, they're not who you thought they were going to be. There's a little bit of disappointment. But with Henry Aaron, it superseded everything that I thought he would be. And so a lot of people didn't know that he played in the Negro Leagues. And it's still kind of an awakening for a lot of people when they come to the museum and they see this photograph of a young Henry Aaron standing at the train station in Mobile, Alabama. He's 18 years old.
I've seen that black and white. You wouldn't know who he was. Looked
no,
like
you
an
wouldn't.
orphan.
No, he weighed about 150 pounds at that
He
time.
looked like an orphan.
and he's standing at the train station in Mobile. And if you notice at the picture, at the foot, at his feet, at his foot, I should say, is a duffel bag.
Right.
And he told me, he says, Bob, I may have had 2 changes of clothes in that bag, $1.50 in my pocket, and a ham sandwich that my mama had made me, going to go chase that dream. He was leaving to go then join the Indianapolis Clowns of the Negro Leagues, 1952. This skinny, cross-handed hitting shortstop. So he was a right-hand hitter who was hitting with his left hand on top.
How old was he in that
18
picture?
18 years old. 18.
Huh? 18.
And so, hitting in that manner, the fear is that you break your wrist hitting in that manner. Henry Aaron is knocking the cover off the baseball in a highly unorthodox fashion. When he gets to the Clowns, they put the right hand on top, and the rest, as they say, is history. And so it's such an eye-opener because here's one of the greatest players in Major League Baseball history, and then you learn that he came out of the Negro League.
How did they name him the Hammer? How did that even come out?
Well, before he was known as the Hammer in the Negro Leagues, he was known as Pork Chops. And we teased him. We said, well, Mr. Aaron, why did they call you Pork Chops? Well, apparently all he ate when he traveled with the Clowns was pork chops and fries. And he says, well, I guess that was the only thing I knew how to order off the menu. So he found something and stuck with it, man. And they nicknamed him Pork Chops, but he earned the nickname Hammer because he just hit everything hard. And I don't think he would consider himself a home run hitter, although he broke Ruth's record and became, the all-time home run king until Barry Bonds breaks his record.
Let me cut you off. My stepfather was a number banker, and he had Jewish partners and what have you. Man, when Hank hit that, I think it was 714 or something. What was
715?
715.
Yep.
At the house, my stepfather said every black in Harlem has played 715, and if that come out, it's gonna break the bank. I'm telling you, how you got your stories. I got a couple. Yeah, man, oh boy, they was sweating bullets. Everybody
Play
that number,
715.
boy. Yeah, that man, my mother was like, "Will you get out of here?"
Hell, I might better go buy a lottery ticket to play 715 tonight.
Yeah, so
but man, you cannot reduce Henry Aaron's life to being just a great baseball player. Henry Aaron was an extraordinary human being who became a philanthropist, a civil rights icon, a humanitarian, an astute businessman, a tremendous businessman. And
philanthropy, nobody knows about you.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
You
That's what I'm saying.
gliding over that. Had no idea about pork chop or to me, and I think I'm halfway astute. Why I want you, to me, an authoritarian. You know this. Buck was like your daddy. Buck was there. Buck transmitted all of that to you, and
I'm trying to give it back to people now.
Yeah,
just as Buck gave it to me, I'm trying to give it back. And Carlos, I hope that these stories never die. I hope whoever comes after me will keep these stories alive. And so, but Henry Aaron meant the world to me. And so his passing, man, that hurt. And of course, I didn't have a whole lot of time to kind of dwell on it, because once the media caught wind of his death, it was just a whirlwind day. You and I were trying to connect, and from about 10 o'clock yesterday morning up until about 10 o'clock last night.
Go with Roland?
Oh, it went great.
I admire him.
Well, Roland, and Roland has been to the museum on a couple of occasions. And so, it was Roland Martin's show and ESPN various shows. And
what did you talk about?
We talked about Henry. We talked about Henry Aaron. And he had myself and Howard Bryant, who wrote a wonderful book on the life of Henry Aaron. And Claire Smith, who's in the Hall of Fame reporter, writer, who now works for ESPN. And so we all, yes.
Yeah, I'm the Black Network. That's what I care about.
Absolutely. And so we spent a good hour plus talking about Henry Aaron, life and times of Henry Aaron. And so, it was sad, but you hold on to the memories. And like I said, for me, this kid from Crawfordville, Georgia, I got to meet my childhood idol, and I got to spend time with my childhood idol. And it was amazing, man. And I tell the story all the time. And we've had some extraordinary people visit this museum. We've had American presidents visit this museum. We've had first ladies visit this museum. Dignitaries like General Colin Powell, a plethora of athletes and entertainers. And the only time I've ever been starstruck was when Henry Aaron came to this museum. And to the day he died.
Tell me this, did him and Buck, I'm rude as hell. Did Henry ever be with Buck and come to Kansas City?
Oh yeah. No, that was an admiration.
Talk about some of that, if you would.
Yeah, no, that was an admiration. Buck was, of course, much older than Mr. Aaron. Yeah, much older. Buck would be 110 this year. Henry Aaron died at 86.
so Buck.
And so, but Buck tells the story. He first sees Henry Aaron in 1952, and the Monarchs in Mobile playing a spring training game. And so Buck says they go out to exchange lineup cards, and the Clowns manager was a guy named Buster Hayward. And so they go out to the mound to exchange lineup cards. Buck says he looks at the lineup card and he sees this kid Aaron's name batting in the third slot. And he looks at Buster Hayward and he says, "Buster, who's this kid Aaron?" And he says, Buster has this big grin on his face. He said, "Oh, Buck, you got to see him." And Buck said, "Okay, well, we'll see what he got." Well, by the time the game had ended, this kid Aaron had gone 4 for 4 with 2 home runs. And so that night, Buck says he and Buster Haywood out having dinner. And Buck says, "Well, Buster, I ain't gonna have to worry about that kid Aaron by the time you get to Kansas City." He said, "What you talking about, Buck?" He said, "Somebody gonna sign him." And true enough, the Boston Braves signed Henry Aaron away. They would become the Milwaukee Braves, and of course, they would become the Atlanta Braves. Henry Aaron will go down in this game as one of his all-time greatest players. But it all starts in the Negro Leagues. You know what I'm saying? And that was his pathway. And he never forgot that. And so when he gets to the clowns as an 18-year-old kid, he's a baby. He's about to go play with grown men. Those grown men, however, Carlos, took care of him. Yeah, they put him under their wings, they nurtured him, and they protected him. And when he left to go pursue his major league career, he took them with them in spirit. They wanted him to be successful so that another one would get the
His
opportunity.
success was their success.
Absolutely. Even though they were past their prime. They weren't going to be able to get there, but they got there through
Through
this
him.
kid. Exactly.
And that's, you know what? See, I don't feel our community has totally that same spirit. We're trying to
We
get it
used to
back.
have it. We got to get it back.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we got to get it back.
We don't have to reach I don't have to reach the top of the hill. If I can contribute to that youngster that's in kindergarten right now and he take it to the top, I'm good.
And that's the mindset that we should have. That's the spirit of humanity and community that we should have. You know, I didn't get to wherever I'm going by myself, and I know that. And so I have a responsibility to help the next person, if I can, move up. And if they supersede anything I do, hey man, I'm cheering. I'm happy, and that's the way we should be. And I hope that we regain that sense and understanding because it's embedded in our culture. We've never been that kind of standoffish people that didn't care about the other people. When I grew up in small town Georgia, hey man, whatever we had, and we didn't have much, but whatever we had, anybody else could have some of it. That was always the way it was.
If I
And,
got a
and so
half a piece of bread, you can get half of
you get
that.
the other half. Exactly. And so hopefully we'll regain that sense of community again and work diligently to help others be successful.
I think that having conversations like this, if people have access to looking at this, it might make them, makes you possibly reset and say we need to reset our values
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we're going to have a strong community. We got to have a strong community throughout, not just in the sports realm or the business realm or the educational realm.
Yeah.
We've got to complement one another. We have to support one another, and all of that. I'm sounding like you. Really, is tied to baseball. I told you how it was in South Carolina.
Yeah.
That sport out, man. Our whole community. You go to
Will
one
come
of
out.
the
Absolutely.
dusty ass games, and they
Yeah.
had the popcorn and the whatever, and the peanuts because they're growing
People
peanuts.
said
The big,
people sat on the hood of their cars or they brought the chairs. Yeah, no, I remember that. It was the same way in Crawfordville, Georgia. My older brothers were playing. I was too young, but I'm watching it. They played, they didn't even call it baseball, they called it hardball. They're playing hardball. Yeah, they got a hardball game going on at the park. And and so growing up 80 miles from Atlanta, idolizing Henry Aaron, uh, getting an opportunity to meet him, spend time with him, to hear his incredible story. When I go back to April 8th, 1974, he's chasing Babe Ruth's record, the record that really no one thought would ever be broken, and particularly a black man in the deep South. And so Carlos, he is getting bags and bags upon bags of hate mail.
I remember.
There, there are death threats. Yeah, there are death threats on his life. His family is in hiding. And as I've said on a couple of interviews, for a black man in the deep south, there were no idle death threats. You took this very serious. And you
No
think
idol,
about,
nothing.
no, and you think about in his lifetime, he had already seen Dr. King assassinated. Hell, he saw John F. Kennedy assassinated. You saw Malcolm X assassinated. So no, there are no idle death threats. And this is 27 years after Jackie Robinson had broken baseball's color barrier.
Shoot, they
27
still
years.
hanging people.
That's what I'm saying. 27
2021.
years after Henry Aaron is being he was dealing with the same level of hate and vitriol that welcomed Jackie Robinson into the major leagues. 27 years later, because this black man was about to break this iconic white baseball figures record, and that did not sit well with some people.
Where were you at when he broke that record?
I'm in Crawfordville, Georgia, in my parents' living room, and
Well, tell
I
me this.
remember.
What was the you remember I said the numbers? The new, I don't know what the whole city, everything was about that game. I don't care if you was in the financial industry or what. When that game came on, the world stopped.
Yeah,
White supremacy really. I'm thinking about when he circled them bases.
oh yeah,
that white guy ran out
yeah.
there.
The two young white kids came out to celebrate, but everybody thought they were coming out to do something too.
Right. Go ahead.
And the scary thing about it, is, he had his personal bodyguards, and they had snipers in the ballpark. Can you imagine if the snipers had pulled the trigger?
Nobody know. Talk about it, baby boy.
And fortunately they didn't, because the kids were coming out to celebrate.
They
weren't coming out to do any harm.
They were happy.
Yeah. And so that thing could have turned into a major tragedy. Yeah. And so, but he didn't know if he was going to make it around the bases, because of the death threats. And what I admire about Mr. Aaron was the fact that somehow or another, he found a wherewithal to put all of the fear that he might have been carrying, to push it aside, step in the batter's box, and go about your business just like it's another day at the office. And I remember hearing a soundbite from my good friend Dusty Baker. Dusty Baker said a hammer came to him and said, "You know what? I'm gonna get this over with. I'm tired of this. I'm gonna get this over with." And he hit the home run off my another good friend, Al Downing, the great Al Downing. And and it was cause for celebration. But you know what? He could not celebrate. It was relief. Wasn't joy. It was relief. It's like, okay, this is finally over. Maybe they'll leave me alone now. And Carlos, it took him almost 25 years before he could finally celebrate this great accomplishment, to the point where he could exhale and say, okay, I did something pretty doggone special. And that, it's a shame that that was kind of taken away from him. And it's only been over recent times that people have, I think, really come to grips with just how amazing this man really was.
How do you think, I was listening to something, radio in the car last night on the way home, Barry Bonds and that whole situation with him,
Yeah.
surpassing Hank.
Hank handled it beautifully. And as typical, the media sometimes will try and get us to spew hatred amongst one another. And Hank would not succumb to that. There was no way in the world he was going to say anything disparaging about Barry Bonds to another black man.
Tell me
He
this,
wasn't going to do it.
Bob. How do you see? Because I'm talking a little bit about Hank's era and a little after Hank.
Uh-huh.
You see what Major League Baseball and sports in general, how they did peep rolls and different things. See, I look at sports as it's sport. You can say he took this, he took that. Hey, no telling, because all these tests just over
Yeah.
25, 30
Well,
years have just
yeah.
come into play.
Well, the thing that we know is we can't determine who did and who didn't. You know, we'll start to pinpoint a few and say they did it, but we don't know who all did it.
But to me, at the end of the day, it's more whether it was in the person still had to make contact. The person still had to steal them bases. I don't care.
Well, it is what happened when Barry was making the run to break the record and came to Buck. They said, Mr. O'Neill. And they were trying to get Buck to say something bad about Barry, and he wasn't going to do it either. He said, Mr. O'Neill, what do you think about steroids? And Buck looks at him, he says, son, the only reason we didn't use steroids, we didn't have steroids.
Telling them
and here's the thing, Carlos, he wasn't condoning the use of steroids, but what he was trying to convey is, I'm not so high and mighty that I'm going to tell you what I would or wouldn't do, and I'm not faced with that set of circumstances. You know, and so if you do it and you know it's illegal, then you have to be punished. You know, and so that's just the way. That's not only the way in sports; it's the way in life. But this is a game that's been predicated on cheating. You steal signs, you do all these things. You know, we saw what happened in the Astros with the electronic stealing of signs and these kinds of things that they got accused of, and so
Patriots. I'm like. You know, sports is about winning.
And so for some, it's winning at all costs.
I think it was Lombardi or somebody's talking about, hey, America don't remember second place.
No, they don't.
In the championship game, you'd be like, who the other year took second, huh? Can't even remember.
No, nobody cares.
So
nobody cares. But, you know, he handled it with the humility that we knew and loved him for. You know, and I felt it was such a difficult situation because they were trying to put him in the middle of that. And he refused to succumb to it. And so he handled it again with the same grace, class, dignity as he did with everything in his life.
How did you ever meet his wife?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, when I got a chance to tour him in 1999, his wife, Billy, was with him. And you know, she had been a TV
You went on a tour with him?
I took them on a tour of the Negro Leagues Museum.
So
when they come here to Kansas City in 1999. Baseball is celebrating the 25th anniversary of him breaking Ruth's record. The Royals were playing host, and so they had set up for him to make his first visit to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And Buck was out of town. So I drew the assignment of taking my childhood idol on a tour of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, man. I was a nervous wreck. Like I said, it's the only time I've ever been starstruck is when I was around Henry Aaron. And so I got myself together and took him on the tour of the museum. Right after that, when we finished the tour, we go across the street to the Gym Theater. And two of my dear friends, Jason Whitlock and Joe Posnanski, were both writing at that time for the Kansas City Star. And they host a fireside chat with Mr. Aaron at the Gym Theater. Carlos, the theater was filled to the rafters. I mean, and he laid it all out. He didn't hold anything back about that pursuit of Ruth's record. So you got to remember, in 1973, he finished the 73 season at 713, 2 home runs shot. Now he got to go through the entire off season wondering because now I'm close to it. Everybody know it wasn't a matter if it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when it was going to happen. So now you think about this. He got the entire off season, and he got to look over his shoulder everywhere he's going.
Because they will pop him.
That's what I'm saying. You know, and so gets into the season, and of course, didn't take long before he got it done, got it out the way, man.
Boy,
and he laid it all out on the line.
Can you imagine that pressure on you every time you come out the Negro League? You got to be thinking.
I got to look over my shoulder. I got to look over my
And then
shoulder.
you
And
got
so
to
somebody,
perform.
exactly. You know, and I don't know if people can fully grasp. It's hard for us to even fathom that. You know, we talk about these, you know, we're so dramatic in the world of sports, do or die. You know, it's a do or die play situation. Well, now we're talking real life do or die, you know, kind of thing.
They
So
was saying they was they was gonna kill him, and you better not break the record. And then even after he broke the record, he almost had, I think, almost had to go in hiding because I'm up in New
but they
York.
still
I'm
people
only in
still
high
mad.
school.
Yeah, now people still mad. They're the haters who were sending the hate mail, you know, they were still upset. You know, slowly but surely it started to kind of diminish, you know, and fortunately no one made an attempt on his life that we are aware of anyway. You know, who knows? But
How do you have you heard any stories about how did the organization receive the whole having Hank and all the stuff that was buzzing around them? How support?
no, you know, they did as good a job as they could. You know, they had the bodyguards and they had the people protecting his family and that kind of thing. But can you imagine that? Your family's in hiding. You know, I think back to Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa when they were, you know, chasing the all-time single season home run record. And every time one of them hit a home run, their kids were there at home plate to greet them. Henry Aaron's family is in hiding. You see what I'm saying? You know, and so he couldn't enjoy it. There was nothing joyful about this
About
when
that.
it should have been. It should have been. He was robbed of the joy of one of the greatest accomplishments in sports history.
But I let me say this. I think there's a thread that runs through that in Black history and sports in general. You know, Carlos uh,
Mhm.
and other athletes that weren't able to enjoy their accomplishments.
Yeah, no, they should have come back from the Olympics, man, with endorsements and everything
Muhammad
else
Ali.
waiting for them. Same thing. Same thing.
So that's what I'm saying. I look at that common thread, and that's why I'm always saying that I'm a Black nationalist and what have you. I make it clear, and then I always bring up uh, there's no color. My son is married to a white person that I love my daughter-in-law like I love my kids, but that does not stop me from talking about the issues that
Yeah,
we're confronting on it because it's only one race, it's a human race,
human race.
but
Absolutely.
we have to deal with what we're living with. And it's been example after example of the barriers that have been put in front of Black people across the board. And sports has been a outlook in all the different sports that we have shown our character and our ability to overcome some of the social injustices that and we manifest to me our character through sports a lot. We couldn't we couldn't be chairman of the largest company, but we can rise with our physical talent in these sports to show you what we made of.
Yeah. Well, God bless Henry Aaron with tremendous talent, a tremendous heart, tremendous will and determination. And all of those things were exhibited as he made his ascent into this game. And you know, sometimes often overlooked, man, is the life they had in the minor leagues. We thought it was tough for them in the major leagues. Ooh, the minor leagues were a whole nother
Run that
story.
down a little bit for our audience.
Yeah, because in the minor leagues, you going and playing in all these little white southern towns, it was hell. They
How was
caught
they getting
hell.
there? You know,
They
I've
were
watched the bingo long, but
yeah, well, in
did they
this
have
case, they were
buses?
usually by bus, you know, because that was the perils of
Was
being
it
in the
like
minor league.
on the road? Talk a little bit about.
Well, for the Negro League players, man, if you couldn't find a black-owned establishment, you were in trouble. So what they would typically do is they fill up, they get the sardines and the peanut butter and crackers and bologna and that kind of thing, so that you had it on the bus because you weren't sure where you might be able to get a meal. And what makes it even more ironic is that these folks would come and fill up the ballpark and cheer them, but they couldn't get a meal from them. And it's like it just blows your mind. And the kids that come into the museum, segregation just absolutely blows their mind. And thankfully, they can't even fathom a
Yeah,
country
especially
that
the white
operates that.
kids.
Even all the
Yeah,
kids,
they like, huh?
yeah, they're like, oh, that was dumb. And they're right. It was dumb.
Because they got a lot of these white kids got a lot of black ball players that they worship.
Well, but you think about this, and I think, Carlos, it goes to the innocence of a child. When Jackie Robinson braced the color barrier, you didn't just see black kids saying, I'm Jackie Robinson. You saw just as many white kids saying, I'm Jackie Robinson, because they didn't see Jackie Robinson, a black ball player. They saw Jackie Robinson, a baseball player that they admired the way he played the game. And they wanted to be just like him. Same thing with Willie Mays. The same thing with Henry Aaron. It's only when our children move into the world and then they're introduced to color. And people poison their minds and even more so their hearts, about other human beings. And so I wish we could all stay kids. If everybody could
I
just be
never knew
told.
how Buck. I'm serious. I used to get mad, but I didn't understand. Buck was, man, to me, they hurt him, and he always was so damn gracious. It just made me sick. But then color, and I'm saying I had seen a PBS. They had done a special on him, and he said, "I'm gonna kill him with kindness." They crucified me, but I'm gonna kill him, and it's coming back, baby.
And I think Buck understood, as many of the players from the Negro Leagues, because I've had an opportunity to talk to so many of them, and none of them harbored any bitterness, particularly about baseball. Well, number one, you could not convince them that they weren't playing the best baseball that was being played anyway.
Right.
Everybody else thought it was in the major league, but they never did. They knew how good they were. And quite frankly, the major leaguers knew how good they were. So you weren't going to convince them, that they were inferior to their white counterparts. They didn't like the things that were happening to them, but they never allowed that to harden their hearts with hate. And what Buck would always say is that hate eats you up on the inside. Man, it'll take you out of here.
Man. I'm serious. People like Buck, again, but if you don't have the exposure, if I didn't see that on PBS, if I hadn't seen all the different things, I would know him really way from afar. But and me being in Kansas City, I seen that prevail. It's like Martin Luther King. I'm a Panther type guy, pistol and all of that. But the nonviolence, I'm saying the way they help is getting me a little bit in line with my ghetto self to try to a little savoir faire, because take you a long way.
Well, Buck said something to me, Carlos, and I used to ask him, because to me, there is a certain innateness about those who are able to do that. You're not forgetting, but you're able to still to forgive. Or in this case, you were willing not to try and perpetrate against those who perpetrated against you. And I used to ask them, I said, Buck, where did that come from? And you know what he told me? He said, my daddy told me when I was a boy, treat every man the way you want to be treated. The golden rule. Now, we all know the golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't all live the golden rule. And Buck took something that his daddy said when he was a kid, and it carried him throughout his life. And I think that's why he lived such a long, fulfilled life, and he started to see the tides turn. He really did. Those who had maybe hated him once upon a time started to fall in love with this man, and it was an amazing thing to see.
Because I didn't understand, but I'm saying, coming from New York, before Buck who was over the museum, the first one to be over the museum? I forgot what his name was. And
We
he
had we
improv
had Don, we had Don Motley, who was the
Motley. All
executive
right,
director. Buck was always the chairman. He was a
all right.
volunteer
Well, it
chair.
seemed like Motley had overshadowed because I used to eat at Maxine's.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
back
yeah, and they all hung out at
yeah,
Maxine.
I
They
was
all
talking
hung
to
out at
Sonny
Maxine.
Gibson
Uh
last
huh.
night.
Uh huh.
Go ahead,
Yeah. Uh
about
huh. And
Maxine.
so they used to all hang out at Maxine's, and so
That's
Horace.
where I learned about the Negro League in Maxine.
Horace Peterson, who came up with the idea to do a Negro Leagues Museum.
Right.
Well, that's where they all used to hang out, eat at Maxine. And Buck and everybody hanging out there. And Horace came up with the idea. His original idea was to do a Negro Leagues Hall of Fame. And Buck said, "No, Horace, we don't need a Hall of Fame. I believe that the ball players who are good enough, they should be enshrined in the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown." And he
Like
said,
we're
"What?"
talking about Black history. We don't need that.
Exactly.
We got
Exactly. So
something.
we
We
didn't
need
need
to
a
be in
separate
it.
Hall of Fame. And so he says, "Well, what would you suggest?" He said, "A Negro Leagues Baseball Museum." He felt that it was more important for us to preserve and celebrate and educate people about this story than it was to create a competing Hall of Fame when you know that you're going to have a finite number of people that you can put in your Hall of Fame. Negro Leagues baseball hadn't been played in over 60 years. And so that's when we went down the path of creating a Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And of course, Buck was his longtime volunteer chairman for 16 years until he passed away in 2006.
Well, Horace, whether you know it or not, I renovated. I was in construction there. I did that Black Archives down there.
And
And
see, I never got to meet him. I never got to meet Mr. Peterson.
oh well, Horace was like one of my partners, and his son used to come over, spend the night with Carlos all the time. And uh Jim Watts introduced me to Horace. Horace was more like me, eccentric to a degree. People, and I remember when Horace went to California when he was getting certified as an archivist and all of that. And Vine Street was so young at that time. You could buy lots down there for $25, whether you
Yeah.
know it or not. Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
and
Yeah,
and
no, man, I feel a little bit detached because I never got a chance to meet him. And it was his idea. It was his idea to do this.
Juneteenth was Horace.
Yeah.
People be trying to steal Horace Peterson when he came back from California. I think he was at Cal University and he learned and he started bringing those exhibits, and then he started looking and uh, came up with the epiphany of the jazz, just like Eddie Baker. Uh,
hmm
those are people that I don't care what they say, who did this. Those are the impetus from my point of view, and that's things that I know personally
Yeah.
on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm happy
Well,
that it has come into fruition, and as
yeah.
I said,
No, we don't ever want to forget Horace Peterson because there would not be a Negro Leagues Baseball Museum had it not been for his epiphany, his brainchild to want to do a tribute to the Negro Leagues.
but
And,
you
and,
only an
and
extension of that. Just like we're talking about Hank, there was somebody before Hank
of course,
that's
of course.
black that Hank looked up to,
Yeah.
and
There were guys playing with him like Woody Smallwood. Woody lived here in Kansas City.
talk to give a little something on that. I know we
Yeah.
going, but
Yeah, no, Woody lived here in Kansas City, and Woody spent many years working for the High Life distributorship, the Miller High
Miller.
Life distributor. And Woody played for the Indianapolis Clowns. Was there when Hank Aaron was there, and Woody was the actual first board president. And so Woody was instrumental in this museum as well once the museum got off the ground. And so Woody was involved, and I got to know him, in his latter years before he tragically passed away. And his wife, his widow, Barbara Smallwood, is still here and still with us, thank goodness. And
Who else
so,
has been instrumental out the past in supporting you?
No, there have been a lot of people who were early organizers of this museum.
Because our people don't know the names. I don't know them.
Yeah.
Put their name. This is going to be in history, hopefully.
Yeah, well, people like Phil Dixon, who's a noted historian, and Larry Lester, who's a noted historian, Lloyd Johnson. These folks were all at the table once we started the idea of doing a Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and they all played a role in helping shape the early foundation of this museum. And so, yeah, our success is certainly predicated on the work that went into this idea when nobody had any money. You got an idea to do a museum, but nobody had any money, or this museum didn't have any money. And these folks were very diligent in believing that this needed to be done. And thankfully, we were able to get it done.
I'm asking you a lot of questions, but how long did it take for y'all from the start of the museum to getting the black?
Well, early on, because the operations were so, they're so slim, it wasn't no red or black.
Oh, damn. No red or black?
There was no red or black, because there certainly wasn't enough black to make any red, because you're not really spending anything that you didn't have. And so the museum, by and large, had been successful for quite some time. Now, we hit a little stretch, Carlos, right in that kind of mid 2000s, right after Buck passed away, when the economy took a nosedive. We had a pretty murky transition in leadership. The heart and soul of the museum, Buck had passed away. There wasn't really a transition plan in place. And ultimately, we hired someone else to be in this role that I'm in today, and it didn't work out. I think they would all say they made a mistake. And so, of course, I had left.
Hindsight is always the best.
Well, absolutely. And I left, but about 13 months, I came back to rejoin the organization.
He was a good man. And that goes to your character, as far as I'm concerned. And what I'm learning, really, that you can't hold grudges and you can cut your nose off despite your face.
You know what, though, Carlos? I don't know if I would have felt that way had I not been there when Buck didn't get in the Hall of Fame.
All right.
And I think I was there for a reason. Buck missed by one vote from getting in the Hall of Fame. I'm told that I missed by one vote from getting the job. And I'm not comparing me not getting the job with Buck not getting the Hall of Fame. There's no comparison. But the way Buck handled not getting in the Hall of Fame, I think that rubbed off on me. I was there for a reason. And I saw how gracious he was in defeat. And while I felt like they had made a mistake, I wasn't going to do anything or step out of character. And perhaps maybe that, left an impression. I don't know, but also realized quite early on in the process that it wasn't going to work with me and the person they had tabbed, because I think he felt like I was lurking over his shoulder. And so I decided on my own that it was going to be in the best interest of the museum and my own best interest that I leave. And then 13 months later, I was coming back to become being introduced as president of the museum. And man, we've had a tremendous run since that time. It'll be 10 years this April since I've been back.
Well, again, that person that hey, audience, Bob had an appointment with me yesterday at 5:00 that we had set for about 3 or 4 days. And so Roland Martin calls Bob. I'm ready to go on at 5:00, 5 minutes to 5. And Bob says, Carlos, how flexible you are. And I'm like, man, what is he talking about? But I realized Roland Martin has a larger audience than me for sure. and I'm like, I don't like this, but this is what's best for the museum and all these other people. And then so I go on a rant to Bob on a text about me being black about Cascade Sports being hometown, and we should get first dibs and all of this. Bob doesn't. Some brothers be like, hell with that Negro. He'll never talk to me again. Bob lets that stuff roll off his back and be like, Carlos, what time we gonna do the interview tomorrow? And make me feel so bad. I had to apologize, Bob. I'm glad that you have that type of personality that you're not holding no grudge. No matter what I'm saying, Bob is cool. Like, Negro, we're gonna do the daggone interview. Chill. I'm saying you didn't say none of that, but I think, like you said, that Buck rubbed off on you. When I see people like you, Buck, Hank, handle these situations, I'm trying to bring myself in line with that. It's hard when you.
Well, it's not always easy. We're human beings. We're all fallible. We all have emotions. We get angry, and so it's not easy. But I think as I try to navigate through this life, there are things you can control and you can't control. And when those folks made the decision to vote the other guy in, I couldn't control that. I thought I had done everything that I could possibly do to demonstrate to them that I was ready. But for whatever reason, they felt like I wasn't. And it was a close vote. And be honest, Carlos, had I won the position with an 8-7 vote, that ain't exactly overwhelming confidence.
Well, yeah, vote of confidence.
Yeah, no, it is not. And so I think it actually worked out for me.
What did you do in that time period?
I went to go run an organization called the National Sports Center for the Disabled. They were a Colorado headquartered nonprofit organization that did therapeutic recreational sports programming for people with disabilities of all ages. But they had a Kansas City office. And so I went to become executive director of that organization. So my office was in Parks and Rec's office on 63rd Street. Mm-hmm. And so, but my heart was always here. And so when things started to really, really go bad, and I get a call saying, would you consider coming back?
What was that like when you got that call? Be honest. What was that like?
No, and I've said this on many occasions. I think people assume that it was an easy decision for me to come back because they know how much I love this place. This place has been a part of my life. I'm in my 28th year of affiliation with this organization. 28 years. And so there was an investment in this professionally and personally. And so they knew how much I love this place. But Carlos, it was the most gut-wrenching decision I've ever had to make. Because it was both the human side of the fact that, hey, I wasn't good enough the first time, things are going bad. Now you want me to come back. But then the other side of it was the uncertainty. What if you can't fix it? Well, what if you can't fix it?
What if you stepping into quicksand?
And the way that we are, we don't ever remember the guy that messed it up. We remember the guy that was there when the ship sank, and so I'm fighting against this thing because whatever legacy I may have had was already in place. People remembered that. They remembered the relationship that I had with Buck O'Neill and all the great things we had done for this museum. And it's like, okay, do you want to mess that up? And so I'm trying to be as rational in my mindset as I possibly can. You're never supposed to make these decisions with your heart. You're supposed to make these decisions with your head. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that I made the decision with anything other than my heart. Because the more I tried to talk myself out of not coming back, Buck was on the shoulder saying, son, come on back home. Come on back home.
Not come back to the museum. Come on home.
Come on home. And I pushed everything aside, even at the fear of failing. I felt like I needed to do this for Buck, and I needed to do this for myself. I did not want to see this museum fall by the wayside.
Tell me this.
Many had put so much into it.
Again. that incident over at the YMCA
Yeah.
with the water.
Yes.
What did that do to uh, how you were moving forward?
Man, I tell you what, that was one of the darkest moments for me that I can remember. We had worked so diligently to restore that old building. You know how much work Mr. Gates put into that. And he was getting the community engaged and involved, and we had created this beautiful space.
Tell the audience that don't know what that building represent, and to the Negro League
Yeah.
and the
No,
foundation.
the Purcell YMCA, right around the corner from where the museum operates, is the birthplace of the Negro Leagues. That's where the leagues were formed on February 13th, 1920. Andrew Roop Foster led a contingent of 8 independent Black baseball team owners into that YMCA for a meeting, and out of that meeting came the birth of the Negro National League, the first successful organized Black baseball league. So that building had, tremendous connectivity to our story. And so the late white philanthropist, Landon Rowland, bought that building and donated it to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in hopes that we would one day expand our
What
operations.
years was this? If you
This is in the early 2000s when he bought that building from land clearance and donated it to the museum. And so we sat on it for years. And after Buck passed away, though, we started to really, well, just prior to him passing away,
who
we
was
started
the
to,
spearhead on that?
well, there were a lot, but Julia Irene Kaufman, when Buck O'Neill passed away, at his public memorial service, donated $1 million of her money to the Negro Leagues Museum to start the redevelopment of the Buck O'Neill Center. There had been some others who had been involved prior to that, but that was the first major donor. She loved Buck. Clearly, she loved Buck, and
Yeah,
she loved the Negro
$1 million
Leagues.
worth for sure. Would somebody love me like that?
And then Mr. Gates got in and sweat equity. He's in the building with his boots,
What
his
can you say
jeans.
about Mr. Gates? Not about him. He's like my mentor from afar. Mr. Gates say, "I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna do it in my
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
I'm gonna do it with
And
my
but
money."
he's demonstrated that his way can be the successful way. He built an empire. He built an empire. And he's a savvy businessman. And I enjoy my conversations with him because I learned so much. And he loved Buck O'Neill too. And he did not want to see Buck's dream of building the Buck O'Neill Education and Research Center in the Purcell YMCA fall by the wayside. And so he just came in, took over the project, became our volunteer project manager. The community came in, they were all moving debris in the early stages, had this idea.
Getting that
We
trash
trans
and stuff up out of there.
Yeah, exactly. We transformed the first floor, where the old gymnasium was, and created this beautiful event space. And we're rolling with this
Did they ever
project.
find out who did that?
We never will, man. But I can't help but believe, Carlos, it was an inside job.
Oh no, I know it was an inside job. I was a contractor.
So
when
you know.
when I came in and my people did the pictures, how that stuff was snipped, and you
Yes.
gotta to snip that type of pipe.
You got to know what you're doing.
prepared.
Yeah,
That ain't
yeah. No, they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew where the control room was. They knew everything. So there's no doubt to
How
me
much
that
was
it
the
was
damage? Assess that.
over $500,000. Over $500,000 in damages.
Did we have
And
insurance?
the insurance waiver didn't cover it. They always find a loophole. Yeah, no, it didn't cover. We thought that we were covered, but we weren't. And so we had to kind of come together and raise the money to now clean up the building. And I tell you what, man, I learned a lot about the damaging power of water.
Oh, please.
Oh my! Of course, you know it in your former world. Mold, mildew, water gets to where it wants to go, and you can't stop it.
Because water, like it forms it. You put it in the jug, it's in the jug. Put it in the cup, it's in the cup. It's going to seep into everything.
It does. And it leaves a trail behind it.
Where y'all at?
Well, we cleaned up the building now. We've removed all the mold and mildew out of there, but we had to tear everything out. So now we're hopefully will get going again on restoring those areas that were damaged and start the process of hopefully finishing this building.
What's supposed to be in the building?
Well, we're going to expand our operations, exhibits, expanded exhibit opportunities, classroom spaces, office lease space, what we think is going to be one of the most amazing interactive baseball experiences that looks at the math and science of baseball, that's targeted for middle school kids, an event space that was already finished, but we got to restore it so that it can essentially be used the way that it was used when the building opened in 1914. It was the primary meeting place, and that's where all the social clubs, everybody met there in our community. It was the place outside of the church where everybody met.
Tell me this, what is the Negro League doing to bring more Black young ball players into the sport? Because
yeah, man, I tell you what, we're working hard to show them, number one, that they have a place in this sport, that we have a rich legacy in this sport. And baseball, to me, unlike the other sports, is far more aspirational in nature. And I say that from the standpoint that you need to see yourself, in that sport. Basketball and football have pretty much taken care of themselves. Those sports are 80% Black. But baseball, you got to see yourself in it, to aspire to want to
a
play
lot
it.
of Black people see dark-skinned people out there, but they're
They
not
speak Spanish.
realizing that
Yeah,
those people
yeah,
are from
yeah, they
Latin
speak
America.
Spanish. Yeah, they Black, but they just speak Spanish.
And that once Jackie broke that color barrier, baseball was a major out for Blacks. In New York, we might didn't play that form when I was young, but it was the broomstick and the Spalding ball.
Yeah,
it was
no,
baseball.
Yeah.
We every kid in my age group, 69, we was pitching and hitting. And fortunately, I lived like 3 blocks from Yankee Stadium, and McCombs Park was there. Man, you could go see all of them games for $2 in the bleachers when I was young. Now they done put it out of. Even when I came to Kansas City, I used to go to the games all the time. You can't go to the game with a family and buy goods now. What do you got to say about that, Bob?
Well, and that's why we're excited about the partnership that we just entered to rebrand the former Kansas City T-Bones into the Kansas City Monarchs. And this is a major deal for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And again, professional sports are going to continue to escalate in cost, particularly after coming off of COVID, where they lost so much revenue. You couldn't get fans into the stands, and sponsors were taking back some of the money because you couldn't deliver on what you had said you were going to deliver on. And so, baseball lost a lot of revenue last year. And that's why you saw the NFL determined to get a season in, no matter what.
I was wondering about that, how much this economic pushed sports and a lot of things, because, and they might have been right. I was like, everything needs to shut down. Everything, sports, but the money wouldn't let it shut down.
You're talking about $1 billion industry, man. No, we're gonna find a way to get this done. And you know what, though? I think our country needed it. They really did. Because last year was tough, man.
Hey, man, it was a bunch of anxiety. Man, there was guys like me that couldn't wait to watch the game or any type of sport. It's like you're in that house and
I don't ever remember a time when there was no sports to watch on TV. You know, and that for a period of time, that's what we had going until the NBA came back. You know, I was, you know, when Michael Jordan's documentary came out, we all were glued to the TV because it gave us something that we could watch.
Well,
You
not just Michael, you know, Black Bottom, any I forgot. You asked the president, you seen that? Yeah, because they didn't seen everything that can be produced.
And it's hard for me to watch the rerun of a basketball game when I already know the outcome. You know, and some people can. I don't do that. You know, so by that time, man, I was
No,
just
hey man, you promoting the Negro League 24/7. I be like, is this Negro doing it in his sleep? I have never. But you know another thing. I'm giving you kudos before we close this up.
Yeah,
you are tech savvy to a degree, and you're constantly, man. I'm like, man, I thought I posted and did all of that. You're constantly doing that, and all of that has a residual effect.
It really does
on the museum, and it puts you all out there, and people that don't know nothing about baseball, if they see the text or what have you, and they Negro League, they're gonna show you love. They're gonna thumbs.
You know, and honestly, man, I came into this whole social media thing kicking and screaming. You know, because number one, I didn't need anything else to eat anymore at my time. And a group of students from Webster University, MBA students, did a marketing case study on the museum several years ago. And they presented to me. And they made the case on why at that time I should be on Twitter. You know, they made the case. And when they made the case, I'm like, that makes sense. Now I don't know nothing about Twitter, but I'm gonna get on there. And they got me started. And yeah, now I've been tweeting ever since.
Yeah, you can't. Hate to put you with Trump, but you trumping it on the baseball team.
We built a network of followers who love all things Negro League.
Right.
They really do. And Carlos, they are loyal. So they're going to buy stuff. They're going to support the museum. They make contributions. It's been incredible to see.
Let me say this. I think, especially now I'm talking about white people. I talk white and black. Especially as these younger white ball players and things are coming up, and the truth about baseball and these records are coming out, they're picking black heroes that they trying to emulate their damn game after.
Yeah, well, you know, and I think sports is so universal. So you admire those who do it the way that you want to be able to do it. But see, like I told you, I wanted to be Hank Aaron. I tried to stand like Hank Aaron. I tried to swing the bat like Hank Aaron. I did everything I could, but I couldn't be Hank Aaron. Yeah, but I tried.
Or Jackie.
Yeah.
You know, you remember we talked earlier about that National League. And that National League, them black ball players stealing home and stuff, them people wasn't even still. He stole home. If you heard it on the radio and didn't see it, you wouldn't believe it. How you steal home? And black ball players was doing it. And when you did that, you did a promo piece on Papa
Papa Bell.
Papa Bell. And you said that Negro, they stopped the game. The Mexicans said, how he get over on third? Stop the game. Where's the film? Man crossed the field. And in the American League, in the major leagues, they wasn't doing none of them stunts.
No, they weren't. And that's the style of play that those players from the Negro League took over with them to the major league.
And that made the game, Gibson that you talk about.
Yeah. It made the game faster. It made it more exciting, you know, and we need that style back today. We really do. And so that's why we need to be involved in this game.
How you think about the Kings? Your boy, Chris Evans.
He's doing an amazing
job. What he's doing for...
Man, I'm so proud of that young man and what he's doing to promote the game in our community, but even more than promoting the game, providing opportunities for kids to play this game and play it at a high level. And so we've got kids coming. There are kids playing. We just now got to make sure that they get seen so that we can create the opportunities for them to go to the next level, whether that next level is college or whether that next level is to the show. But we're starting to get kids playing.
And I'm giving a shameless plug, but it's not shameless, to Chris Evans and the King Foundation. I'm asking all of our community, take a look at what the King Foundation is doing if you're a baseball fan, and see how you can donate economics, some money to that, because he is influencing a lot of young kids out the urban core. We represent the bottom 3/4 of the community. I feel Cascade Media Group as a whole, and he is giving an opportunity for kids that don't have money to go to a team, because playing team sports costs money now, equipment and things. And you can be helpful by donating so that he can buy bats, he can travel, he can do the things in the style that you would like to see your kids and your community represented. And it's all about economics when it comes to these youth sports. And it's not just enough that he's donating a lot of time with these coaches and parents. We got to get behind that. And I know the Negro League has supported Chris from the onset.
Yeah, no, man. We love Chris. We love the work that he's doing. I'm so excited about these young people that he has playing ball. They're learning the game the right way. They love the game. He's helping them and nurturing them in our game. We need more people like Chris.
How do you feel when he brings them, or you around them, the teenies, the middle?
I love it. I love it because
what do you see in them?
I see the spirit of the Negro Leagues already in them. They got a little swag, and that swag comes from playing the game, knowing you can play the game, and having confidence in your abilities. And Chris continues to instill confidence.
I love you keep saying that swag. So that swag is coming from kindergarten all the way up.
All the way up. Yeah, absolutely. And embrace it. Embrace it. As I told you, Buck said, if you got something to show it.
Well, he be showing them things. Hey, listen, we came, we swept, we did this. And I love that he keeps them in that moment.
Yeah.
And keeps them.
And he's helping them understand the importance of commitment, dedication, passion, but work. Your work ethic got to match all of this. You know what I'm saying? And so he's instilling that in them at a young age. And I think it's going to pay huge dividends for those young people who are part of that program. So I tip my cap to Chris.
All right. In closing, what's your parting words as we wind this down?
Well, man, like I said, we are so excited about the things that we're doing. We're gearing up right now to make a big announcement on February 13th of our Negro Leagues 101 celebration, continuing on the heels of the 100th anniversary celebration. And so, we don't know what this crazy virus is going to do, but we think we've got a game plan in place that'll allow us to continue to be successful. So, stay tuned for some more great things, from the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
All right. And as we always say, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
This program is brought to you by the City of Fountains Coaches Association.